The bear's claws raked across timber as the Apache elder crashed backward into the ravine, his weathered hands grasping at nothing but mountain air. Below, death waited with open jaws, massive, brown, and roaring with primal hunger. But the lone rancher watching from the ridge had already made his choice, diving headfirst into hell itself, not knowing this single act of courage would bring him something he'd never dared dream of. In his empty cabin nights, a woman who would transform his exile into paradise. I'm sharing this extraordinary frontier story that changed everything I thought I knew about love, debt, and the price of loneliness. Follow me to the end and drop a comment about where you're watching from. I'd love to know how far this tale of unexpected grace has traveled. Part 1. The September wind carried the scent of pine and something else, blood. Fresh blood that made Colt Hayward's mare dance sideways on the narrow mountain trail. He'd been checking his fence line since dawn, finding 3 posts down near Widow's Creek when the screaming started. Not human screaming, the kind of roar that turned a man's bones to water. Colt spurred his mare forward, Winchester already in his hands. Through the aspens, he saw it a massive brown bear, 7 feet of muscle and fury, cornering something against the ravine's edge. No, not something, someone. An old Apache man pressed against the crumbling rock face, his hunting bow snapped in half at his feet. Blood soaked through his deer-hide shirt, where claws had already found their mark. The bear reared up, ready to finish what it had started. "Hey!" Colt's shout cracked like thunder. The bear's head swiveled, small eyes finding this new threat. That moment of distraction was all the elder needed. He tried to dodge sideways, but his moccasins slipped on loose shale. The old man tumbled backward over the edge. Colt didn't think. He dove from his horse and slid down the ravine's steep face rocks, tearing at his leather chaps. The elder had caught himself on a twisted juniper root dangling 40 feet above the rocky bottom. The bear was already lumbering along the edge, looking for a way down. "Grab my hand." Colt anchored himself against a boulder and stretched down, the Apache's eyes dark as winter nights met his. No fear there, just a kind of resigned acceptance that made Colt's chest tight. The root started tearing free. "Now, damn it!" Their hands clasped just as the juniper gave way. Colt's shoulders screamed as he hauled the man up, both of them scrambling over the edge as the bear found its path down. Colt raised his Winchester, but the elder grabbed the barrel, shaking his head. "No kill. She has cubs. She's gonna have us for supper if we don't move." Colt fired into the air instead. The bear startled, then ambled away, her point apparently made about trespassing in her territory. The elder tried to stand and collapsed immediately. The gashes across his ribs were deep, and his ankle bent at an angle that made Colt's stomach turn. "My cabin's 2 miles east," Colt said. "Can you ride? I walk." "Like hell you will." Colt whistled for his mare, who approached nervously, ears flat against the bear scent. He lifted the old man as gently as he could, ignoring the pride that flashed across those weathered features. "Name's Colt Hayward." "Toka." The word came out tight with pain. "Of the Mescalero." Colt knew the name, remembered it from the peace talks five years back, before everything went to hell at San Carlos. Before his brother died with an Apache arrow through his chest. His jaw clenched, but he kept riding. A wounded man was a wounded man. The cabin materialized through the pines like it always did, small, solid, alone, just how Colt preferred it these 7 years since the war. He'd built it with his own hands, far enough from perdition's rest that folks forgot he existed, which suited him fine. Easy now. He carried Toka inside, laid him on the only bed. The cabin's single room felt suddenly crowded with another person in it. Colt hadn't had company since the circuit preacher got lost in a snowstorm last winter. He fetched water from the creek, boiled it with yarrow root the way his mother had taught him before fever took her. Toka watched silently as Colt cleaned the wounds, wrapped the ribs, splinted the ankle with strips of rawhide and straight pine branches. "You know healing," Toka said. "Know enough to keep things from dying." Colt didn't mention the countless horses he'd doctored, the wounded soldiers he'd tried to save at Chattanooga. Some made it, most didn't. You need to stay put for at least a week. That ankle's bad. I must return. You must heal or you won't return anywhere except 6 feet under. Colt set down a cup of pine needle tea. Drink this, helps with the pain. For 3 days, Toka barely spoke. He accepted the care with a dignity that made Colt uncomfortable, like he was intruding on something private just by helping. The old man's fever spiked the second night, and Colt sat up with him, cooling his forehead with creek water, listening to him mumble in Apache about eagles and debts and granddaughters. Sana, he kept saying. Sana must not rest now. Colt didn't know what Sana meant, assumed it was delirium talking. On the 4th morning, Colt woke to find his bed empty. Toka's makeshift crutch, a pine branch Colt had carved, lay abandoned by the door. No blood trail, no sign of struggle, just gone as if the earth had swallowed him whole. Damn stubborn fool. Colt searched for hours, finding only a single eagle feather where Toka had slept. He tucked it above the doorframe, not sure why. Maybe proof that he hadn't imagined the whole thing. 2 weeks passed. Colt returned to his routine, mending fences, tending his small herd of cattle, trying not to think about the empty conversations he had with his horse, just to hear a voice. The loneliness had teeth lately sharper than usual. Winter was coming, and winters were always the worst. Too much time to remember faces he'd rather forget. He was splitting wood behind the cabin when he heard it. The soft sound of feet on pine needles, not trying to hide but not announcing themselves either. Apache way. A woman stood at the edge of the clearing. No, not just stood. She waited perfectly still, like she'd grown from the earth itself. Young, maybe 20 summers, with hair black as crow feathers hanging loose past her waist. Her dress was traditional Apache soft deer hide, decorated with beads that caught the morning light. But it was her eyes that stopped Colt's breath. Dark, like Toka's, but holding something else. A resignation that looked too heavy for someone so young. You are Colt Hayward, not a question. I am. He set down the axe carefully. You lost. I am here. I can see that. Question is why. She moved forward, then each step deliberate until she stood before him. Up close, he could see the delicate tattoo marks on her chin, the kind Apache women earned at womanhood. Could see, too, the way her hands trembled slightly before she clasped them together. My grandfather lived because of you. Toka's your grandfather. The pieces clicked. Is he well? That ankle needed. He is well. She reached into a leather pouch at her waist, pulled out something wrapped in rabbit fur. He sends this. Colt unwrapped it carefully. Inside lay a knife Apache made with a handle of carved antler and a blade sharp enough to split sunlight. Beautiful work, the kind that took months to create. Tell him I'm grateful, but this is too much. I didn't help him for payment. The knife is mine. Yours, my joining gift. She lifted her chin, and he saw her throat work as she swallowed. I am Sana, granddaughter of Toka. I am sent to be your wife. The words hit Colt like cold water. He actually stepped backward, nearly tripping over the woodpile. I'm sorry, what? You saved the last elder of our band. The debt is more than one life. It is the wisdom of generations preserved. By our way, such debt must be balanced. Her voice remained steady, but he caught the slight quaver underneath. A daughter for a life. I am given. Given. The word tasted bitter, like property, like honor. No. Colt shook his head hard. No, that's not. I don't want payment. Sure as hell don't want a wife I didn't ask for. You go on home and tell Toka the debt's clear. No obligation. Something shifted in her face, surprise, maybe, or hurt gone before he could read it properly. I cannot return. Sure you can. I'll saddle my horse right now, take you back myself. You do not understand. She unknotted a section of her dress, revealing her left shoulder. A fresh scar ran across it, the kind made by rope burn. I have been given. To return would bring dishonor to my grandfather, to you. To refuse this debt would mean my exile is for nothing. Exile. The word sat heavy in his chest. A woman given in marriage cannot return unmarried. This is the way. Colt ran his hands through his hair, pacing now. This is insane. You can't just people don't do this. It's not right. Right. She tilted her head. You saved a Mescalero elder. Your people killed many of ours. Is that right? That's different. How? He didn't have an answer for that. The morning sun climbed higher, casting long shadows across the clearing. Sana hadn't moved, still standing there like she'd wait forever, if needed. You don't even know me, he said finally. I could be a bastard, cruel, the kind of man who you are not. How could you possibly know that? My grandfather lived in your home for days. He saw no whiskey bottles, no anger marks on the walls. Your horse comes when you whistle. Animals do not trust cruel men. You could have let him die. Easier for you. But you risked the bear, carried him, healed him without knowing his name. She paused. You are lonely, not cruel. The observation cut deeper than he expected. That doesn't mean you should be forced. Do you have a woman? What? No. Do you want a woman? Colt felt heat rise to his face. That's not the point. Then what is the point? She moved closer, and he caught her scent. Sage, smoke, and something sweet like spring berries. My grandfather must honor the debt. I must accept his decision. You must. What must you do? The decent thing. Which is not taking advantage of a woman who has no choice. She studied him for a long moment. You think I am weak? I didn't say that. You think I cannot choose because I am Apache, because I am woman, because my grandfather decides. She straightened, and suddenly she seemed taller. I could have run, many places to hide between our camp and here. I could have shamed my grandfather, broken his heart, destroyed his honor in his last years. I chose to come. Why? She looked away for the first time. Where else would I go? The question hung between them like morning mist. Colt saw it then, the way she held herself too carefully, the fading bruise on her right wrist. He'd initially missed the way she'd said, unmarried, like it was a wound. Someone hurt you. Not a question. Her silence was answer enough. Your grandfather doesn't know. He knows enough. She met his eyes again. I cannot marry among my people now, cannot bring children to a husband's fire. I am damaged. Given to you is kindness disguised as honor. At least with you, I might live. Alone, I would not survive winter. The brutal honesty of it made his chest tight. He understood survival, understood choosing the least terrible option when all choices were bad. God knew he'd made his own devil's bargains. You can stay, he heard himself say, but not like that. There's a lean-to out back I can fix up. You'll be safe. When spring comes, we'll figure something else out. You refuse the marriage. I refuse to own you. There's a difference. She considered this, head tilted like a bird studying something new. My grandfather will not understand this difference. Then don't tell him. Lie. Protect his honor while keeping yours. Seems fair enough. For the first time, something that might have been a smile touched the corner of her mouth. You are strange, Colt Hayward. Been told that before. She looked around the clearing, taking in the cabin, the woodpile, the small garden plot already harvested. I will work, cook, mend, earn my place. You don't have to earn, I do. The firmness in her voice stopped him. If not as wife, then as... What am I to you? He didn't have an answer. Couldn't call her a servant, the word felt wrong. Guest implied temporary. Friend seemed presumptuous. How about neighbor, he offered. Neighbors help each other out. No debt involved. Neighbor, she tested the word. Living in your shed. It's a perfectly good lean-to. In winter. I'll fix it up, make it warm, you'll see. She walked past him to examine the lean-to in question. Currently, it housed his tools, extra saddles, and enough spider webs to knit a blanket. She turned back, one eyebrow raised. Neighbor, she said again, and this time he was certain he saw amusement in her eyes. Colt spent the rest of the day clearing out the lean-to patching holes, stuffing cracks with moss and mud. Sana worked beside him without being asked, her hands quick and capable. When he struggled to secure a corner beam, she wordlessly showed him an Apache technique using wrapped sinew that held twice as strong as nails. "Your grandfather teach you that?" "My father, before the soldiers came to San Carlos." The casual mention of violence stopped his hands. "I'm sorry." "For what? Were you there?" "No, but—" "Then you have nothing to be sorry for." She continued working, but added quietly, "My grandfather says you lost someone to Apaches." "My brother, 5 years back. Now I am sorry." "Were you there?" She almost smiled. "No." "Then you have nothing to be sorry for." They worked in silence after that, but it was a different kind of silence, comfortable, like they'd reached some sort of understanding. As the sun set, Colt surveyed their work. The lean-to wasn't pretty, but it would keep the wind out. He'd dragged in his extra cot, his winter blankets, even the small iron stove from the corner of his cabin that he never used anyway. "It's not much," he said. "It is mine. Yeah, yours." She ran her hand along the doorframe, touched the blankets, examined each corner like she was memorizing it. "I have never had a space that was only mine." The way she said it, wondering, almost confused, made him want to ask more, but her face had closed off again, returning to that careful stillness. "I'll let you get settled. There's beans and cornbread from yesterday if you're hungry. I will cook tomorrow. You don't have to—" "I will cook." She paused. "Neighbors share food, yes. I suppose they do." That night, Colt lay in his too-quiet cabin, aware of another person just yards away for the first time in months. He could hear her moving around occasionally, arranging things. Once he thought he heard her humming a low, mournful tune that made his chest ache with a loneliness he'd thought he'd gotten used to. He'd saved Toka without thinking about the consequences. Story of his life, really acting on instinct, dealing with the aftermath later. But this aftermath had a name and dark eyes and hands that knew how to build things properly. Through his window, he could see lamplight seeping through the lean-to's cracks. She was still awake too, probably wondering what kind of mess she'd walked into. A white rancher who wouldn't take what was freely given, who insisted on maintaining distances that made no sense in her world or his. But Colt had learned the hard way that taking what you wanted without considering the cost always came due, eventually. His brother had wanted Apache land, had taken it with violence, and ended up with an arrow through his chest. The war had taken what it wanted from everyone, leaving them all hollowed out and scrambling to fill the empty spaces with whatever they could find. He wouldn't take from Sana, not when she'd already had so much taken from her. A coyote howled somewhere up the mountain, answered by another. The sound usually comforted him, reminder that he wasn't entirely alone out here. Tonight it sounded different, mournful, like it was calling for something it had lost. Through the wall he heard Sana's door open, footsteps on pine needles. He rose, reached for his rifle, then stopped. She wasn't leaving. Through the window he could see her standing in the moonlight, face turned up to the stars. Her lips moved, prayer maybe, or promises to ancestors he couldn't see. She looked so young, too young to be bartered for honor, too young to speak of survival like she'd already learned its full cost. But then war and frontier life aged everyone before their time. He'd been 17 when he'd killed his first man at Shiloh. By 20, he'd lost track of the count. Sana lowered her face from the stars, and for a moment their eyes met through the window. She didn't startle or look away, just nodded once. Acknowledgement of something: shared insomnia, shared displacement, shared understanding that some wounds showed up in the quiet hours when defenses dropped. She returned to the lean-to. The light went out. Colt lay back down, but sleep wouldn't come. His mind kept circling back to that rope burn on her shoulder, the resignation in her eyes when she had first announced herself as his wife. Someone had hurt her badly enough that exile seemed like escape, that marriage to a stranger seemed like salvation. The thought made his hands clench into fists. He'd known too many men who treated women like possessions, who took what they wanted because they could. His own father had been one of them until his mother had finally taken his brother and him and run. They'd made it as far as Tennessee before fever took her, leaving two boys to figure out the world on their own. Maybe that's why he couldn't accept Sana as payment. He'd seen what happened when women had no choices, no escape routes. He wouldn't be another cage, no matter how gilded or well-intentioned. Tomorrow he'd ride to town, get supplies to properly winterize the lean-to, maybe pick up some fabric so she could make warmer clothes if she knew how. He'd teach her which plants were safe to eat, where to find water if the creek froze, give her tools to survive on her own when spring came and she decided to leave. Because she would leave. They always did. And he'd go back to his conversations with horses and his empty cabin and his memories. But at least she'd go because she chose to, not because she had to. That had to count for something. The wind picked up, rattling the loose board on the north side of the cabin he'd been meaning to fix for months. Through it he could hear something else, soft, muffled, trying to be silent. She was crying. Colt pulled his pillow over his head, knowing there was nothing he could do. Some wounds needed privacy to bleed. Some grief demanded darkness and solitude. He'd had his share of both, but the sound still worked its way under his skin into the spaces between his ribs, where he stored all the things he couldn't fix. By the time dawn crept over the mountains, painting everything gold and possible, the crying had stopped. Smoke rose from the lean-to's chimney. She'd figured out the temperamental stove. The sight of it evidence of another person making themselves at home in his carefully constructed isolation should have bothered him. Instead, for the first time in 7 years, the morning felt less empty. When he stepped outside, she was already at the creek, washing her face. She'd braided her hair, a long, thick rope down her back that swayed as she moved. The morning light caught the red undertones in the black, turned her skin to warm bronze. "Neighbor," she said without turning around. "Morning. I will make breakfast." "You don't." She turned then, and he saw her eyes were slightly swollen but determined. "I will make breakfast. You will eat. This is how neighbors work, yes." "I suppose it is." She walked past him toward the cabin, then stopped. "The knife. You did not take it. It's yours. It is a joining gift. For husband." "I'm not your husband." She studied him for a long moment, then pulled the knife from her pouch, set it on the woodpile. "For protection, then. Every neighbor needs protection." Before he could respond, she disappeared into the cabin. Soon the smell of coffee and frying meat drifted out. His stomach growled. He'd forgotten to eat yesterday, too, focused on fixing the lean-to. The knife sat on the wood, its blade catching the morning sun. He picked it up, tested its weight. Perfect balance. The antler handle had been carved with tiny symbols. He didn't recognize Apache signs for strength, maybe, or protection, or marriage. He tucked it into his belt. Whatever it meant, it was too fine a gift to waste. Inside, Sana had transformed his meager supplies into something that actually looked like food. She'd found the wild onions he'd forgotten about, mixed them with the last of his potatoes and the venison from 2 days ago, even made some kind of flatbread on the stovetop that smelled like heaven. "Sit," she commanded. He sat. She served him then herself, taking the chair across the small table. They ate in silence, but he watched her carefully catalog everything, the gaps in the chinking, the loose floorboard near the door, the way the morning light revealed every corner. "This cabin needs work," she announced. "It's fine. The north wall has holes. Cold will come through. I've managed 7 winters, alone, and now there are 2. She said it matter-of-factly, like it had already been decided. Winter is harder with 2 if the space is not properly prepared. "You might not be here for winter." She looked at him steadily. "Where would I go?" He didn't have an answer for that. "I will gather moss today," she continued. "For the holes, you have horsehair. Some. Good. Mixed with mud, it holds better. She stood, started clearing dishes. Do you have plans today? Need to check the eastern fence line. Maybe hunt if I see anything worth taking. I will come. You don't need to. I am excellent tracker. She lifted her chin. Better than you, probably. That's so. Apache learned to walk silent before white men learned to walk at all. Despite himself, he almost smiled. Prove it. Her eyes lit up the first genuine emotion he'd seen besides sadness. Challenge, if you want to call it that. What stakes? Stakes. Every challenge needs stakes. Otherwise, it is just playing. He thought for a moment. If you can track better than me, I'll stop arguing every time you try to help. And if you track better, you answer one question honestly. Any question I ask? She considered this, her head tilted. One question. One. Deal. She offered her hand. They shook on it, her palm calloused but smaller than his, fitting inside his grip like it belonged there. She pulled away first, busying herself with packing provisions for their hunt. They saddled the horses in comfortable silence, Sana moving around the mare with practiced ease that told him she'd grown up with animals. She'd changed into pants she must have brought with her men's pants too big, cinched tight with a length of rope. The sight of her dressed for practicality rather than tradition made something shift in his chest. Your grandfather know you wear those? He asked as they mounted up. My grandfather knows what he needs to know. She guided her horse with just her knees, leaving her hands free to adjust the bow across her back. Where do we hunt? There's a meadow about 3 miles up. Deer come through in the mornings. Too late now, sun too high. Then where would you suggest? She studied the tree line, nostrils flaring slightly, like she was reading the wind. North, where water runs from rocks. Animals drink and eat of day. He knew the spot, a small spring that bubbled up through limestone. He'd never had much luck hunting there, but maybe that was because he crashed through the brush, like what he was a white man who'd learned woodcraft late and imperfectly. Lead the way, he said. She smiled, then quick and bright before nudging her horse forward. Within minutes he understood the difference between knowing how to move through forest and being born to it. Sana flowed like water, finding paths he hadn't even seen. Her horse's hooves barely whispered against the pine needles. Meanwhile, his own mount stepped on what seemed like every dry branch in Colorado. You ride like cavalry, she said over her shoulder. I was cavalry. This explains much. She pulled up suddenly, dismounting in one smooth motion. Here, we walk now. Why? You want to learn or you want to lose? He dismounted, tied his horse next to hers. She was already moving, crouched low, fingers trailing along the ground. He tried to copy her movements, felt like a bear attempting to dance. Here, she whispered, pointing at marks in the dirt he'd never have noticed. Buck. Big one. Maybe 6 points. How can you tell the points from tracks? Weight distribution. See how deep here he carries his head. Heavy. Many points. She moved forward, then stopped. But we do not want him. Why not? Smell. Colt inhaled, caught nothing but pine and earth. I don't. Blood. Old blood. He is injured, maybe from fight, maybe from wolf. Injured animals are dangerous, unpredictable. She was already moving again, this time toward a cluster of aspens. She froze, one hand raised. He stopped too, though he couldn't see anything worth stopping for. Then movement. A doe, sleek and healthy, stepping delicately toward the spring. Behind her twin fawns, old enough to have lost their spots, but young enough to stay close. No, he whispered, not a mother. Sana looked back at him, something unreadable in her eyes. You refuse easy meat. Got my rules. What rules? No mothers with young, no animals at their dens, no more than I need. She studied him long enough that the deer family moved on undisturbed. These are Apache rules. They're decent rules. Same thing, maybe. She rose, no longer concerned with silence. You lose. What? We haven't even... I found tracks. I found buck. I found doe. You found noise and confusion. but she was smiling as she said it. You owe me answer. We should keep hunting. Need meat for answer first, then hunt. He sighed, knowing she was right. He'd lost the moment they'd entered the woods. What's your question? She walked back toward the horses, running her hand along the aspen bark. No, not yet. Not yet. I save it for when I need truth most. The way she said it made him wonder what truths she thought he was hiding. He had plenty, the real reason he'd left Tennessee, the things he'd done in the war that still visited his dreams, the depth of loneliness that sometimes made him consider walking into the winter mountains with no supplies and no plan to return. They hunted for 3 more hours, Sana teaching him with patience he didn't deserve. How to read the angle of broken twigs, the meaning of different scat patterns, the way birds went quiet in some silences, but not others. When she finally brought down a young elk, with a single arrow through the heart, he felt like he'd witnessed something sacred. Your turn, she said, handing him her bow. I'm better with a rifle. Rifle is loud, scares everything for miles. Bow is conversation with death quiet personal. He took the bow, tested its draw, heavier than he'd expected. Show me. She moved behind him, adjusting his stance, his grip. Her hands on his arms were gentle but insistent, positioning him like he was clay to be molded. She smelled of sage and sweat and something uniquely her that made his concentration scatter. Breathe, she said against his ear. In when you draw, hold, out when you release. A rabbit appeared at the edge of the clearing, nose twitching. Too small, he said. Perfect for practice. I don't kill for practice. She came around to look at his face. You are strange man, Colt Hayward. So you keep saying. The rabbit bounded away. They returned to field dressing the elk, working in companionable silence. She was efficient with her knife, the same one she'd tried to give him, separating meat from bone with an economy of motion that spoke of years of practice. Someone taught you well, he said. My mother, before the fever took her. How old were you? 9 winters. She paused in her cutting. Old enough to remember, young enough to need remembering. He understood that. The way memory became both comfort and torment, keeping the dead alive in your mind while reminding you constantly of their absence. My mother died when I was 12, he offered. Fever, too. The fever comes for many mothers. She resumed her work. This is why I would not shoot the doe. Fawns need teaching still. They packed the meat in cloth, loaded it onto the horses. The sun was beginning its descent toward the mountains, painting everything gold. As they rode back, Sana suddenly pulled up short. Someone was here, she said, examining the ground near the cabin. Colt saw it too, now hoofprints he didn't recognize, boot marks near his door. His hand went to his rifle. 3 men, Sana said, maybe 4 hours ago. They approached the cabin carefully. The door stood open. He was certain he'd closed it. Inside, his few possessions had been rifled through, nothing taken but everything touched, moved, examined. Neighbors, Sana asked. Don't have any. Nearest homestead is 8 miles south. She examined the tracks more carefully. Shod horses, military shoes, on men. Soldiers out here. Maybe, she pointed to a distinctive scrape pattern. This one drags left foot. Injury maybe, or drunk. Colt knew someone who dragged his left foot, Josiah Briggs from town, who'd taken a Confederate mini-ball through his knee at Gettysburg and never walked right again. Josiah, who'd made it clear he didn't appreciate an Apache lover setting up shop in the territory. We should go, Sana said quietly. If they come back, this is my land, my home. I'm not running from anybody. Brave words, stupid but brave. You can leave if you want. She gave him a look that could have melted iron. Where would I go? That question again. Always that question. They spent the evening preserving the elk meat, smoking most of it over a fire Sana built using wood and herbs that gave the meat a flavor he'd never tasted before. She worked steadily, but he caught her checking the tree line every few minutes. They won't come at night, he said. If they wanted to ambush us, they'd have waited. You know these men. Maybe. One of them anyway. He does not like Apache. Most folks around here don't. She looked at him steadily. But you are different. Wouldn't say that. You saved my grandfather. Would have saved anyone from that bear. No, you would not. She turned the meat over the fire. You say you would because this is what good men tell themselves. But I saw the tobacco pouch in your cabin. Confederate gray. You fought for the South. I did. The South that wanted to own men like cattle. His jaw clenched. It was more complicated than that. Was it men owning men seemed simple evil to me? I was 17 when I enlisted. Fought because my brother fought, because Tennessee was home and home was threatened. Apache fight for home too. This makes us enemies. Does it? She considered this. Maybe, or maybe war makes everyone enemy to everyone. Easier than thinking. They sat in silence watching the fire. Finally, Sana spoke again. The men who came today, they will return. Probably. What will you do? Depends what they want. They want me gone. They don't even know you're here. She gave him that look again, the one that said he was being deliberately stupid. Apache woman's clothes drying on your line, 2 plates on your table. They know. She was right. He'd gotten careless, comfortable, let his guard down for the first time in years. I won't let them hurt you, he said. You cannot promise this. I can try. She stood wiping her hands on her pants. I need something from you. What? Teach me to shoot your rifle. You know bow. Bow does not stop many men at once. Rifle does. He wanted to argue to tell her it wouldn't come to that, but the words would be lies and she'd know it. Tomorrow, he agreed. Early. She nodded, started toward her lean-to, then stopped. The question I saved. I use it now. His stomach tightened. Ask. Why do you live alone? Real reason. He could have given her the easy answer that he preferred solitude, that people were complicated, but she'd earned truth. I killed my brother. The words hung between them like a blade. She didn't gasp or step back, just waited. Not directly, but I might as well have. Last year of the war, he wanted to raid an Apache camp, said they had horses we needed. I knew it was wrong, but I went along, always went along with whatever Thomas wanted. He stared into the fire. The Apaches fought back. Of course they did. Arrow took him in the chest. He died calling for our mother. This is why you saved my grandfather. Balance. There's no balancing something like that. No, she agreed, but you try anyway. She left him by the fire, disappearing into her lean-to. He sat there long into the night, feeding wood to the flames, remembering Thomas's face. Not the dying one he'd gotten good at, not remembering that, but the living one laughing at some joke, planning their future after the war. They'd been going to raise horses together, find wives, have kids who'd grow up as cousins. Instead, Thomas was bones in Tennessee soil, and Colt was teaching an Apache woman to shoot, because men were coming who'd hate her for nothing more than being born. The fire crackled, sending sparks into the dark sky. Somewhere in the distance, a coyote howled, that same mournful sound that seemed to follow him everywhere these days. When he finally went inside, he found something on his table. A small bundle of sage tied with a strip of leather. Protection, maybe, or blessing, or just something to make the cabin smell better. With Sana, he was learning things could mean multiple things at once, or nothing at all, or everything. He hung it from the rafter above his bed. That night, for the first time in months, he didn't dream of Thomas dying. Instead, he dreamed of a woman made of shadows and smoke who moved through trees like wind and spoke in languages he almost understood. He woke to the sound of gunfire. Rolling from bed, he grabbed his rifle, burst outside in his union suit and boots. Sana stood in the clearing, his old revolver in her hands, shooting at targets she'd set up pine cones on fence posts. Half of them were already obliterated. "You started without me," he said. "Sun waits for no one." She fired again. Another pine cone exploded. "This weapon pulls left." You're compensating pretty well. I learn quick. She handed him the revolver, picked up his rifle. Show me. For the next hour, he taught her what he knew: how to lead a moving target, how to reload quickly, how to brace for the kick. She absorbed it all with frightening efficiency. By the time the sun was fully up, she was out shooting him at 50 yards. You make good student, she said, for shooting, not for tracking. Thanks, I think. She was reloading when they herded horses, many horses moving fast. She looked at him and he saw fear flash across her face for the first time. Inside, he said, I do not hide. It's not hiding, it's tactical position. She almost smiled at that, but moved into the cabin. He followed, positioning himself at the window. 6 riders emerged from the tree line. Josiah Briggs led them, his gray hat unmistakable. The others were men from town store owner, 2 ranch hands, the banker's son. The last rider made Colt's blood run cold. Samuel Crenshaw, Indian agent from the reservation, the man responsible for maintaining order among the Apache, which usually meant finding excuses to cut their rations and sell the surplus for personal profit. Hayward, Josiah called. Come on out. We need words. Colt stepped onto the porch, rifle casual in his arms. Morning, Josiah. Little far from town, aren't you? Heard you had some interesting company. My business is my own. Not when it affects the rest of us. Crenshaw nudged his horse forward. I'm looking for a runaway. Young Apache woman, about 20. Pretty thing if you like savages. Haven't seen any runaways. That's so? Crenshaw smiled cold as Winter Creek water. Because Toka's granddaughter went missing 2 weeks back, right after the old man claims some white rancher saved him from a bear. Convenient timing. Maybe she didn't run. Maybe she left. Without permission from the agency, that's still a crime, Hayward, harboring a fugitive from federal authority. Colt felt Sana tense behind the door. He kept his voice steady. Like I said, haven't seen any runaways. Josiah spat tobacco juice. We saw women's clothes on your line yesterday. Man can't do his own washing. Not in Apache dress, he can't. The men spread out slightly, a tactical movement Colt recognized. They'd planned this. Here's what's going to happen, Crenshaw said. You're going to send that squaw out, and we'll take her back where she belongs. No questions asked. You can go back to your hermit life, and everyone stays happy. And if I don't have anyone to send out, then we search the place, find her ourselves, and things get unpleasant for everyone. Colt counted bullets in his head. 6 men, 7 shots in his rifle, 6 in the revolver Sana had. 13 bullets for 6 men. The math worked if nothing went wrong. Things always went wrong. You got a warrant, Crenshaw. Don't need one. Federal authority on reservation matters. This isn't the reservation. Any Apache off reservation without papers is a reservation matter. Behind him, he heard Sana chamber around. Quiet, but Crenshaw heard it too. His smile widened. There she is. Come on out, girl. Time to go home. This is her home, Colt said, before he could stop himself. The words changed everything. Josiah's hand went to his pistol. The ranch hand shifted nervously. Crenshaw's expression went from cold to arctic. That's so. You claiming her as yours. I'm saying she's where she chooses to be. Apache don't get to choose. That's what the treaties are for. Treaties you've been violating for years, selling their rations, letting them starve. Careful, Hayward, that's dangerous talk. Truth usually is. One of the ranch hands, younger, nervous, spoke up. Maybe we should just go. No harm done if... Shut up, Williams, Josiah snapped. You don't know what these savages are capable of. Killed my cousin at Sand Creek. Sand Creek was a massacre, Colt said quietly, of women and children. They had it coming. The air went very still. Even the birds stopped singing. Colt saw Sana move, and then his peripheral vision positioning herself at the side window. I think you should leave, Colt said. Now. Not without the squaw. Then you're not leaving, Crenshaw laughed. You really want to die for some Apache whore? The word had barely left his mouth when the shot rang out. Crenshaw's hat flew off a neat hole punched through the crown. Everyone froze. Next one goes lower, Sana called from inside. I am excellent shot, he taught me. Josiah went for his gun. Colt's rifle was already up, aimed at his chest. Don't. 6 of us, 1 of you, Josiah said. 2, Sana corrected, and I have nothing to lose. That gave them pause. A desperate Apache woman with a gun and good aim was nobody's idea of an easy fight. This isn't over, Crenshaw said, retrieving his hat. I'll be back with proper authority. Federal marshals, if necessary. You do that, and I'll wire the territorial governor about missing rations and dead Apache children. See who gets more attention. Crenshaw's face went purple. You threatening me, stating facts, like you were. They stared at each other for a long moment. Finally, Crenshaw wheeled his horse around. Move out. The others followed Josiah last and reluctant. As they reached the tree line, he called back, You've chosen your side, Hayward. Remember that. Then they were gone, dust settling in their wake. Sana emerged from the cabin rifle still in her hands. They will return. Yes, with more men. Probably. She set the rifle down carefully. I should go. Where? That question again. Always that damned question. I don't know. Mountains, maybe. I can survive alone. No. No. You're not running because of them. This is your home if you want it. She looked at him, something fierce and fragile in her expression. Why do you care what happens to me? He didn't have a good answer. Couldn't explain the way her presence had changed the cabin from a hiding place to something almost like home. Couldn't describe how teaching her to shoot had felt like passing on something essential. Couldn't admit that the thought of her leaving made his chest tight with a loneliness sharper than any he'd known. Maybe I'm tired of being alone, he said finally. That is selfish reason. Yes, good. Selfish is honest. Noble is usually lie. She picked up Crenshaw's ruined hat, examining the bullet hole. I could have killed him. Why didn't you? You would have had to kill the others. 6 deaths on your land brings too much attention. That the only reason she considered this. No, also because you do not want killing. I see it in how you hunt, how you speak of your brother. You have had enough of death. Haven't we all? Some people feed on it, make them feel strong. She tossed the hat aside. These men, they will not stop. Then we'll be ready. Unless you're leaving. She walked to the lean-to, disappeared inside. For a moment he thought she was packing. Then she emerged with something wrapped in deer hide. If I stay, things change, she said. What things? She unwrapped the bundle. Inside lay traditional Apache clothing, men's clothing, shirt, leggings, moccasins, all decorated with intricate beadwork that must have taken months. These were for my husband, the one I was supposed to marry. She held them out to Colt. Now they are yours. Sana, not as husband, as partner, as person who stands with me against men like those. She paused. Unless you do not want. I want, he said, taking the clothes. They were beautifully made, soft as butter. Partners. Partners. They stood there holding pieces of a life she'd expected to have with someone else. The sun climbed higher, burning off the morning chill. Somewhere, Crenshaw was probably already writing his report, calling for reinforcements. Teach me more shooting, Sana said, and I teach you to disappear. Disappear, Apache way, to be present but invisible, to move without sound, to fight without being seen. Guerrilla warfare, survival warfare, only kind that works when you are outnumbered. She was right. If they were going to defend this place, they'd need every advantage. And maybe in teaching each other they'd find something neither had expected, not love, not yet, but partnership, trust. the beginning of something that might survive whatever storm was coming. That night she cooked wearing her traditional dress for the last time. Tomorrow she said she'd wear pants and shirts like him, easier for work, for fighting if necessary. The dress would go into storage, maybe forever. You don't have to change, he said. Everything changes. This is truth of world. We change or we die. She served him elk stew flavored with plants he couldn't name. My grandmother told me this before fever took her too. You've lost a lot of people. Everyone has. This is why we must hold tight to people we find. She met his eyes across the table, even unexpected ones. After dinner, she taught him to walk silently, made him remove his boots, feel the earth through his socks. Then bare feet, taught him to roll his foot from outside in to test each step before committing weight. He felt clumsy as a bear, but she was patient. You think too much, she said. Body knows how to move. Mind gets in way. Story of my life. Then change, story. She moved behind him, hands on his hips guiding his movement. The touch was practical, instructional, but he felt it everywhere, a warmth that had nothing to do with teaching and everything to do with proximity. Better, she said, stepping away. Tomorrow we practice in dark. Looking forward to it, she smiled, a real smile that transformed her face from pretty to beautiful. You are terrible liar, Colt Hayward. Been told that before, too. That night he wore the Apache shirt to bed. It smelled of smoke and sage and possibilities. Through the window he could see light in the lean-to again, but this time no crying. Instead he heard her humming, not mournful, but something lighter, almost hopeful. He fell asleep thinking about partnerships and changes, about standing ground and standing together, about a woman who could put a bullet through a hat at 50 yards and walk through forest like a ghost. When the marshals came, and they would come, he and Sana would be ready. Different kind of ready than he'd been in the war. Not the readiness of violence, but of determination, of having something worth defending beyond just his own isolation. The last thought before sleep took him was surprising in its certainty she belonged here. Not because her grandfather had sent her, not because she had nowhere else to go, but because she'd chosen it. Chosen him in a way, or at least chosen to stand with him, and he'd chosen her too without quite meaning to. Chosen to say this is her home to armed men. Chosen to teach and learn to change his carefully constructed solitude into something more complicated, but infinitely richer. Tomorrow would bring what it brought. But tonight, for the first time, in 7 years, Colt Hayward didn't feel alone. The morning came too quiet, the kind of silence that made Colt's soldier instincts prickle. No birds, no wind, even the creek seemed to run softer. Sana felt it too, standing in the doorway of the lean-to with her hair loose, catching the first light like black water. Something's wrong, she said. He nodded, already reaching for his rifle. They'd developed this wordless communication over the past 3 days, ever since Crenshaw's visit. She'd move, he'd counter-move, like dancers who'd practiced for years instead of days. The first arrow hit the water barrel, Apache arrows, but something was off about them. The fletching was wrong, the balance awkward. Colt pulled Sana behind the woodpile as 3 more arrows thudded into the cabin wall. Those aren't Apache, she whispered, her face pale. Someone wants it to look Apache. Crenshaw. Or your friend with the bad foot. More arrows came, then silence. Colt counted to 30, was about to move when he heard horses approaching fast from the opposite direction. A diversion. The arrows had been meant to draw them out, make them look the wrong way. The cabin, Sana breathed. They're going for the cabin. They ran, Colt covering their retreat with warning shots into the trees. The cabin door stood open. It had been locked when they'd stepped out. Inside, chaos. Everything overturned, and in the center of his table, a document weighted down with a knife. Sana read it first, her face going very still. Eviction notice. They claim you're squatting on railroad land. This has been my land for 7 years. I have the deed. Deed is here. She held up the shredded remains of his ownership papers, pulled from his strongbox, now destroyed. Was here. The rage that filled him was old and familiar, the kind he'd felt watching his brother die for nothing, watching the war grind good men into meat. But Sana's hand on his arm stopped him from putting his fist through the wall. This is what they want, she said. You angry, not thinking, easy to make mistakes. They destroyed my proof of ownership. Then we get new proof. She examined the eviction notice more carefully. This is dated 3 days from now. Why give warning? Because it's not legal. They're hoping I'll run or fight. Either way, they win. He slumped into a chair, suddenly feeling every one of his 35 years. I'm tired of fighting Sana. She knelt before him, taking his hands. Hers were small but strong, calloused from work, but gentle in their grip. Then we don't fight. We think. Apache survived not by strength, but by being smarter than enemies. What do you suggest? First, we hide what matters. She began gathering things: his mother's Bible, the good rifle, her grandfather's knife. Then we make them think they've won. Give up the cabin. No, make them think you're alone, that I've gone. She paused at the door. There's something else. The way those arrows were made, someone taught them. Someone Apache. The implication hung between them. A traitor among her people, or someone forced to help. Either way, it complicated things. They spent the day preparing. Sana taught him how to hide supplies in ways that wouldn't be found buried, but not obviously wrapped in deer hide, that wouldn't rot, marked with stones that looked natural but weren't. She worked with fierce efficiency, and he realized she'd done this before, run before. How many times? He asked as they cached ammunition near the spring. What? How many times have you had to leave? She was quiet for a long moment. 3. First, when my mother died, her family didn't want another mouth. Then, when the soldiers came to the reservation, we fled to the mountains, lived on roots and rabbits for a winter. Then, she touched the rope burn on her shoulder, now mostly healed. When they tried to marry me to a man who already had 2 wives, who beat them. Is that who hurt you? No, I ran from him. It was after, when I was caught. The young men, they said I had dishonored the tribe, said I needed to be taught humility. Her voice was steady, but he saw her hands tremble. My grandfather stopped them before the worst. But damage was done. No man would take me after that. Damaged goods. You're not damaged. She looked at him with those dark eyes that seemed to hold centuries of sorrow. Everyone is damaged, Colt Hayward. Some just hide it better. That night, they enacted their plan. Sana left obvious signs of departure tracks leading south. Some of her clothes abandoned on the trail. Meanwhile, she actually circled back, took up position in a blind they'd built in the rocks above the cabin. She could see everything from there, could cover him if needed. If something happens, he said, you run, don't try to help. I will do what I choose. Sana, would you run if I was in danger? He didn't answer. They both knew he wouldn't. The night passed slowly. Colt sat on his porch rifle, across his knees, playing the part of a man abandoned and bitter. Let them think Sana had left. Let them think he was broken by it. Near dawn, he heard movement. Not horses this time, men on foot trying to be quiet. He recognized Josiah's dragging step, counted at least 3 others. They were circling, planning to rush from multiple directions. Hayward! Josiah's voice came from the darkness. Time's up. Railroad wants you gone. Railroad doesn't own this land, Josiah. Does now. Amazing what money can buy, even old deeds. So that was it. They'd filed a prior claim, probably bribed someone in the land office. Without his original deed, he couldn't prove otherwise. I'll fight it in court, Colt called out. What court? Nearest judge is 60 miles away, and he's railroad too. They were closer now. Colt could smell tobacco, whiskey, sweat, men working themselves up to violence. Just leave. Josiah said, almost pleading. Take your things, go somewhere else. This doesn't have to end bloody. Like it did for my brother. Silence. Then your brother got what he deserved. Apache killer. Least they gave him a clean death. More than he gave their women and children. The truth of it hit like cold water. Colt had always suspected, but hearing it confirmed. Thomas hadn't died in a raid. He'd died committing one. You knew, Colt said. You all knew what he was doing. Everyone knew. Why do you think folks don't trust you? Apple doesn't fall far from the tree. A shot rang out from above. One of Josiah's men cried out, his rifle spinning away into the darkness. Sana warning them she was there. Thought the squaw left, Josiah snarled. I thought a lot of things that turned out wrong. More movement in the darkness. They were spreading out, trying to flank both positions. Colt counted muzzle flashes, 5, maybe 6 men, more than he'd expected. You're outnumbered, Hayward. Give up. Instead of answering, Colt fell back into the cabin, barred the door, let them think he was making his stand there. In reality, he slipped out the back window, crawled through the route Sana had shown him. Within minutes, he was in the secondary position. They'd prepared a depression behind the chicken coop with clear sight lines in 3 directions. The attack came at full dawn. They rushed the cabin from all sides, guns blazing. The door splintered under the assault. Men poured inside, found it empty except for a note Sana had left on the table. You look for Apache. Apache finds you. Josiah emerged, face purple with rage. Spread out. They're here somewhere. But Sana was already moving. Colt saw her slip from shadow to shadow. Apache silent. A man went down with a knife in his shoulder, not fatal but incapacitating. Another found his rifle jammed with mud he hadn't noticed. A third stepped into a pit trap they'd dug, not deep enough to kill, but enough to twist an ankle badly. Ghost, one of the younger men screamed. She's a ghost. She's one woman, Josiah snapped. But Colt heard fear creeping into his voice too. That's when the unexpected happened. Horses approaching, but not from town, from the mountains. Apache horses unshod, moving fast. 3 riders emerged from the tree line. Colt recognized the lead one, Toka's son, the one who'd come that day to give his blessing. But his face wasn't peaceful now. It was painted for war. White men on Apache land, he called out in accented English. You go, now. This isn't Apache land, Josiah protested. All land is Apache land. You just borrow. He raised a rifle, a modern Winchester, not traditional weaponry. You have hurt daughter of our blood. This cannot stand. We haven't hurt anyone. Lies. Sana emerged from cover, and Colt saw bruises on her face he hadn't noticed before, fresh ones. They came in the night 2 days past, when Colt was in town for supplies. Rage flooded through him. She hadn't told him, had hidden it probably to keep him from doing something stupid. But now, he stood from his position rifle trained on Josiah. That true? Josiah's silence was answer enough. You touched her. Colt's voice was very quiet, the kind of quiet that preceded violence. Just scared her a little, reminded her where she belongs. The Apache leader Sana had called him Kuruk, made a sound like a growl. You marked her, she's just a squaw. The word hadn't fully left Josiah's mouth when Kuruk's rifle cracked. Josiah's hat flew off along with a piece of his ear. He screamed, clutching the side of his head, blood running through his fingers. Next bullet lower, Kuruk said calmly. You run now, all of you, do not come back. This isn't over, one of the men said, helping Josiah to his feet. We'll get the army. Try, Kuruk said. We know these mountains. You know nothing. They retreated, dragging their wounded, throwing hate-filled glances back. But they went, and that was what mattered. When they were gone, Kuruk dismounted. Up close, Colt could see the family resemblance to Toka, the same proud nose, the same deep eyes. But where Toka had been peaceful, Kuruk radiated barely controlled violence. You are the one who saved my father, he said to Colt. I am. Yet you keep his gift like property. I keep no one. She's free to leave whenever she chooses. Karuk looked at Sana, said something in Apache that made her face flush. She responded sharply, gesturing at the cabin, at Colt, at the scattered evidence of the fight. She says you are honorable, Karuk translated, that you treat her as equal, not as servant or wife. She is my equal, in some ways my better. Pretty words. White men have many pretty words. He studied Colt with eyes that had seen too much. But she also says you stood against your own people for her. This is not words. This is action. They're not my people just because we share skin color. No, then who are your people? Colt looked at Sana, dirt-smudged and fierce, standing there like she was ready to fight the whole world. Anyone who'll stand with me. Anyone who chooses to stay despite having every reason to run. Karuk nodded slowly. Then surprisingly he smiled. It transformed his face, made him look younger. My father said you were different. I did not believe. White men have given us little reason for belief. Can't argue with that. But Sana believes, and she has survived more than most, seen the worst of men, Apache and white. If she trusts, perhaps I can too. He mounted his horse, his companions following suit. We will watch. If white men come again, we will know. The mountains have many eyes. Thank you. No thanks. Debt. He looked at Sana one more time, said something soft in Apache. She nodded, touching her heart. Then they were gone, melting back into the forest like smoke. Sana sank onto the porch steps, suddenly exhausted. Colt sat beside her, careful not to touch. He wanted to examine her new bruises, wanted to hunt down every man who'd laid hands on her. But more than that, he wanted to respect her boundaries, her right to handle things her way. You should have told me, he said finally, so you could get yourself killed defending my honor. I don't need defending. I need partner. Partners tell each other things. She was quiet for a moment. You're right. I'm not used to having someone to tell. Neither am I. They sat in companionable silence, watching the sun climb higher. The cabin was a mess, would take days to fix. The eviction notice still sat on the table, still claimed they had to be gone in 3 days. But somehow none of it seemed insurmountable now. Karuk won't always be able to help, Sana said. Army is cracking down on Apache leaving reservation. Then we'll handle it ourselves. 2 against many. 2 who've already sent them running twice. She almost smiled. They were not expecting resistance. They were expecting victims. We're not victims. No, she agreed. We're survivors. That afternoon, they cleaned the cabin together, working in sync. She hummed while she worked that new lighter tune he'd been hearing. When he asked about it, she blushed. It's nothing, just something my mother sang, about finding home in unexpected places. Sing it. I don't sing for audiences. Not an audience. Partner, remember. She looked at him for a long moment, then began to sing. Her voice was untrained but pure, carrying a melody that seemed to pull at something deep in his chest. He didn't understand the Apache words, but he understood the emotion, longing, and hope twisted together like rope. When she finished, he realized he'd stopped working, was just staring at her. What? She asked, self-conscious. Nothing, just... That was beautiful. You're easily impressed. No, I'm really not. The moment stretched between them, full of possibilities neither was quite ready to name. Then she turned back to her cleaning, and he to his, but something had shifted. The cabin felt warmer somehow, less like a shelter, and more like something worth protecting. That evening, as they ate dinner, Sana pulled out a piece of paper she'd hidden. I have idea about the land deed. What kind of idea? In town there is newspaper office, yes. Small one. Why? Newspapers keep records. Old papers. If your deed was filed 7 years ago, there might be notice. Proof. Hope flared in his chest. That could work. But we need someone to look. Someone they won't suspect. I could. No, you go to town, Josiah's men follow. I go, they arrest me for leaving reservation without papers. She tapped the table, thinking, "We need third person, someone trusted." Colt thought about it. There weren't many people in Perdition's Rest who'd help him, fewer still who'd help an Apache woman. But then he remembered. Mrs. Chen runs the laundry. Her husband was killed by railroad men 5 years back when he wouldn't sell his plot. She has no love for them. Would she help? Maybe, if we ask right. Then we go tonight, both of us. It's dangerous. Everything is dangerous. At least together we watch each other's backs. She was right. They saddled up after dark, taking the long route through the mountains to avoid the main road. Sana led, reading the trail by moonlight like it was broad daylight. They reached town near midnight, left the horses hidden outside, crept through back alleys to the laundry. Mrs. Chen lived above her shop. Colt threw pebbles at her window until a face appeared, lined, weathered, but eyes still sharp. "Mr. Hayward, what you do here?" "Need your help, Mrs. Chen, please." She studied them both, taking in Sana's presence without comment. Then the window closed. For a moment, Colt thought she'd refused, but then the back door opened. "Come, quickly." Inside, the laundry smelled of soap and starch. Mrs. Chen led them to her small kitchen, poured tea without asking if they wanted any. "Railroad men come yesterday," she said without preamble. "Ask about you, I'd tell them nothing. They're trying to steal my land. Railroad always stealing. Take from Chinese Apache any 1 week." She looked at Sana. "You are Toka's granddaughter. You know my grandfather. He helped when my husband died, brought meat through winter. Good man." "Mrs. Chen," Colt said, "we need someone to check the newspaper archives. For proof my deed was filed properly." "Why not check yourself? They're watching for us." She sipped her tea, thinking, "I do it, but not for you." She looked at Sana. "For Toka, for debt owed." "Thank you," Sana said softly. "Don't thank yet. Might find nothing, might find bad news." She stood. "You stay here tonight. Streets dangerous after dark." She gave them her son's old room. He'd died in the same incident as her husband. 2 beds, but Colt couldn't sleep. Too aware of Sana breathing in the darkness of danger all around them, of time running out. "Colt," her voice was soft. "Yeah. What will you do if we can't prove ownership? Fight anyway. That's not plan. Then we run, find somewhere else." Together, the question hung in the air. "If you want," he said finally. "I want." 2 words, but they changed everything. Not a declaration of love or forever, but something simpler and maybe more important. A choice to not be alone. The next morning, Mrs. Chen left early for the newspaper office. She returned 2 hours later with a smile and a yellowed piece of paper. "Found it. Public notice of land claim properly filed. Your name, correct date, official seal." She handed it to Colt. "Also found this railroad filed their claim only last week. Yours has precedence." Relief flooded through him. "Mrs. Chen, I could kiss you." "You try, I hit you with washing paddle." But she was smiling. "Take to territorial office in Denver. They must honor." "Denver's a week's ride. Then better start now, before railroad realizes what you're doing." They left that night, supplied with food from Mrs. Chen's kitchen and a map of back trails her husband had once used. As they rode out, Sana began humming again that same hopeful tune. "We're not safe yet," Colt reminded her. "No, but we're fighting, together. This is more than I had before." "Me too." They rode through the darkness, 2 damaged people who'd found something worth defending in each other. Not love, not yet, but partnership, trust, the beginning of home. The mountains rose around them, full of dangers and possibilities. Whatever came next, they'd face it together. And somehow that made all the difference. The trail to Denver stretched through valleys that hadn't seen rain in weeks, dust rising with every step their horses took. They'd been riding for 3 days, sleeping in shifts, always watching their backs. Sana had insisted on cutting her hair shorter, with Colt's knife easier to manage, harder for someone to grab in a fight. The sight of those black locks falling to the ground had made something twist in his chest. "Stop looking at me like I've died," she said, running her fingers through what remained still past her shoulders, but no longer to her waist. "It suited you long. Many things suit me. Survival suits me best." She studied the horizon where storm clouds gathered. "Rain coming, we should find shelter." They found it in an abandoned mining shack, the roof half caved, but one corner still solid. As they unsaddled the horses, Colt noticed how Sana favored her left side. "You're hurt, bruised, from Josiah's men." "Let me see." "It's nothing. Partners remember, partners don't hide injuries." She lifted her shirt just enough to show ribs painted purple and yellow. The sight made his hands clench, that familiar rage rising. "I'll kill them." "No, you'll file papers in Denver like civilized man." She lowered her shirt. "Then maybe you kill them." Despite everything, he almost smiled. As the rain started, they huddled in the good corner of the shack, sharing the last of Mrs. M. Chen's bread. The closeness was necessary for warmth, but Colt was acutely aware of every point where their bodies touched. "Tell me about Denver," Sana said. "I've never seen a city. It's loud, crowded, smells like horse shit and coal smoke. You make it sound wonderful. Cities are for people who like people. I'm not one of them. Yet you go there for me. I go there for us, for the land." She was quiet for a moment, rain drumming on what was left of the roof. "When I was small, my mother told me about seeing Santa Fe once. Buildings taller than trees," she said. "Music from windows. Women in dresses with more fabric than our whole band had for winter. You want to dress like that? No, I want to not need to hide who I am." She shifted, wincing at her ribs. "In cities are there other Apache? Some. Working mainly. Servants, laborers. But living, not on reservations. Is that what you want, city life?" She considered this. "I want choice. First time in my life, I want to choose where I go, not be sent or driven or traded." Thunder crashed overhead, and she pressed closer instinctively. Colt put his arm around her, careful of her ribs. She tensed, then relaxed. "I'm not him," he said quietly. "The one who hurt you, I'll never be him." "I know." Her voice was barely audible over the rain. "That's what frightens me." "Why?" "Because I could choose you, and choosing means losing when you leave." "I'm not leaving." "Everyone leaves. Death or decision, everyone goes." He wanted to promise otherwise, but she was right. Nothing lasted forever, especially not on the frontier, where death waited in every shadow. Instead, he just held her as the storm raged, feeling her breath against his chest, the way she slowly stopped shivering. Sometime near dawn, the rain stopped. They emerged to find the trail washed out in places, forcing them to pick their way carefully through new terrain. It was slower going, and Colt could feel time pressing. Only 2 days left before the eviction deadline. They were navigating a narrow pass when Sana suddenly pulled up. "Riders, behind us!" Colt heard them too now, at least 4 horses moving fast despite the muddy trail. They spurred their own mounts, but the pursuers were gaining. "There," Sana pointed to a cluster of rocks above the trail. "We make stand there." They dismounted, grabbed rifles, scrambled up just as the first riders rounded the bend. Not Josiah's men, these wore badges. Federal marshals. "Colt Hayward," the lead marshal called out. "We have warrant for your arrest." "On what charges?" "Kidnapping, harboring a fugitive, assault on Federal Agent Crenshaw." "Crenshaw's no federal agent. He's a thief who steals from the reservation." "That's for courts to decide. Come down peaceful and the woman can go free." Sana made a sound of disgust. "They think I'm stupid. Moment you're chained, they take me too." She was right. These men hadn't ridden this far just for him. They wanted Sana back on the reservation, where she could disappear into whatever fate Crenshaw had planned. "Counteroffer," Colt called down. "You turn around, pretend you never found us." The marshal laughed. "Not how this works, son." "Then we have a problem. 4 of us, 2 of you. Ain't much of a problem." Sana's shot took his hat off before he finished the sentence. The marshals dove for cover, cursing. "Next one aims lower," she called out, echoing Kuruk's words from days before. What followed was a standoff that felt like hours, but was probably minutes. The marshals couldn't advance without exposing themselves. Colt and Sana couldn't leave without giving up their defensive position. Then came the sound neither expected: Apache war cries from the rocks above. Not many, maybe 3 or 4 voices, but the marshals didn't know that. They saw painted faces appear and disappear. Among the stones heard cries that promised death. Apaches. One of the younger marshals panicked, firing wildly at shadows. "Hold your fire," the lead marshal commanded, but fear had already taken root. Kuruk appeared on a ledge above them all, rifle trained on the marshals. "Federal men on Apache hunting grounds. This is mistake. We're pursuing fugitives. You are trespassing. Leave now or we water earth with your blood." The lead marshal was experienced enough to recognize a no-win situation. 4 men against an unknown number of Apache in their own terrain was suicide. "This ain't over, Hayward," he called out. "Law's got long memory. So do I." The marshals retreated and Kuruk's warriors followed them for a while to ensure they kept going. Kuruk himself climbed down to where Colt and Sana waited. "You follow us," Sana said in Apache, then switched to English. "Why? Father's orders. He says the white man who saved him must reach the great town safely." He looked at Colt. "Also, he says if you hurt his granddaughter, he'll stake you to an anthill." "Fair enough. We escort you to Denver's edge. Cannot enter, too dangerous for Apache, but we get you close." "Thank you," Kuruk shrugged. "Debt is debt." They traveled together for a day, the Apache showing them paths Colt never would have found. At night they shared a meal, the warriors gradually warming up enough to attempt broken English jokes that made Sana actually laugh. First time Colt had heard that sound full and genuine. "Your woman," one of the warriors said to Colt. "She shoots good for female." "She shoots good for anyone," Colt corrected. "And she's not his woman," Sana added sharply. "I'm my own woman." The warriors exchanged glances, confused by this concept. Kuruk explained something in Apache that made them nod slowly, looking at Sana with new interest. "What did you tell them?" she asked. "That you are like Mountain Cat, beautiful but belongs to no one." One of the younger warriors said something that made the others laugh. Sana's face flushed. "What?" Colt asked. He says mountain cats sometimes choose mates. When they do, they fight anyone who threatens their chosen." The warrior was looking at Sana when he said it, but Colt had the feeling the words were meant for him. The next morning, at the edge of the prairie where Denver sprawled in the distance, Kuruk and his men prepared to leave. "Be careful," he told Sana in Apache, then switched to English for Colt. "City is full of snakes. Some rattle warning, others strike silent." After they left, Colt and Sana sat on their horses, looking at the sprawl of buildings and smoke. "Ready?" he asked. "No, but ready doesn't matter, only necessary." They rode in through the edges of town where the poor and desperate clustered in shacks not much better than the mining cabin they'd sheltered in. Children ran alongside their horses begging. Sana reached into her pouch, pulled out the last of their bread, broke it among them. "You'll go hungry," Colt said. "I've been hungry before, they're hungry now." The territorial office stood in the better part of town, a brick building trying to look important. Inside, men in suits conducted business that decided the fate of people they'd never meet. Colt hated everything about it. The clerk at the front desk looked at them like something scraped off his shoe. "No Indians." "She's with me," Colt said. "Don't matter, no Indians in government buildings. I need to file a land claim dispute." "Then you file it, she waits outside." Sana touched his arm. "It's fine, I'll be fine." But Colt saw the fear flash across her face. Alone on the streets of Denver, obviously Apache with no papers, anything could happen. "No," he said, "she stays with me or we both go." The clerk sneered. "Indian lover. A landowner with legitimate claim that supersedes railroad interests. He pulled out the newspaper notice Mrs. Chen had found. I think your superiors will want to see this. The clerk examined it, his expression shifting. Wait here. He disappeared into a back office. Low voices carried through the door, urgent, worried. After what felt like forever, an older man emerged, expensive suit and gold watch chain, marking him as someone important. Mr. Hayward, I'm James Morrison, Territorial Administrator. Please come to my office. Both of us. Morrison's eyes flicked to Sana, distaste clear. This is highly irregular. So is railroad companies stealing legally filed claims. Morrison's jaw tightened. Very well. His office was all leather and dark wood, designed to intimidate. But Colt had faced Confederate cavalry charges. Furniture didn't scare him. This document appears genuine, Morrison said, examining the newspaper notice. However, the railroad has filed a prior claim dating from before yours. That's impossible. The land was open when I claimed it. They have documentation suggesting otherwise. Forged documentation. That's a serious accusation. It's a serious crime. Morrison leaned back in his chair. Mr. Hayward, let me be frank. The railroad has significant interests in that land. They're prepared to offer compensation for your voluntary relocation. How much? $500. It was more money than Colt had seen in years. Enough to start over somewhere else, build a better cabin, maybe buy some cattle. No, that's my land. I've bled for it, worked. It made it home, not for sale. Everything's for sale, Mr. Hayward. Just matter of price. Then they can't afford me. Morrison's expression hardened. You're making a mistake. The railroad has resources you can't imagine. Lawyers influence time. They'll tie this up in courts for years. Meanwhile, you can't prove you still own the land without original deed. Then I'll squat on it. 7 years makes it mine by possession. Not if you're evicted first. You mean if I'm murdered first? I don't know what you mean. You know exactly what I mean. They stared at each other across the expensive desk. Finally, Morrison opened a drawer, pulled out another document. There is another option. Sign this and your land dispute goes away. Colt read it, anger rising with each word. This transfers Sana to federal custody. The Apache woman is a fugitive from the reservation. Her grandfather essentially sold her to you. That's human trafficking. Sign her over to proper authorities and your land issues disappear. Go to hell. Mr. Hayward. Colt stood so fast his chair fell backward. She's not property to be traded. She's Apache. Legally, she's ward of the federal government. Legally, you can kiss my ass. Morrison stood two-faced red. You're throwing your life away for a savage who'll knife you in your sleep first chance she gets. That's when Sana spoke perfect English with only slight accent. The only savages I see wear suits and steal with papers instead of guns. Morrison's mouth opened and closed like a landed fish. He'd assumed she couldn't understand, had spoken freely. Get out, he said finally. Both of you. You have 24 hours to vacate the land or face federal charges. We'll see about that. Outside, Colt's hands were shaking with rage. Sana guided him to an alley away from staring eyes. Breathe, she said. Anger makes stupid. They want to trade you for land, like your cattle. I know. Doesn't that make you angry? I've been traded my whole life. For food, for peace, for honor. This is just first time someone said no. She touched his face, her hand cool against his flushed skin. You lost everything for me. Haven't lost yet. Colt, we're not done. There has to be another way. She studied his face, then rose on her toes and kissed him. Soft, quick, barely there before gone, but it stopped his world. What was that for? For being fool who thinks he can fight whole world for one Apache woman. Not for you, with you. She smiled, then sad and beautiful. Still fool. They found a cheap boarding house that didn't ask questions if Money was good. The room was small, one bed, but neither commented on it. They sat at the tiny table sharing a bottle of whiskey Colt had bought, trying to think of options. "We could run," Sana said. "Go to Mexico, start over. That what you want? I want home, but home isn't place maybe. Maybe home is person." Before Colt could respond, someone knocked. They both reached for weapons. "Mr. Hayward, telegram for you." Colt opened the door carefully, took the telegram from a nervous boy who ran off immediately. The message was short. "Railroad men coming, bringing army, Miss Chen." "They know we're here," Sana said. "We leave tonight." "For where? Home, our land. If they want to fight, they'll get one. 2 against army. 3. A new voice from the doorway. They spun to find an older black man standing there, cavalry uniform, worn but maintained. "Sergeant Elijah Washington at your service. Heard you were the Colt Hayward from Chattanooga." "How did you—" "Saved my life at Lookout Mountain. Carried me 2 miles to Field Hospital with Confederate bullets singing past your ears." Colt stared at the man, memory flooding back. "Elijah, you were dying, gut shot. Got better. Took a year, but got better. Been looking for you ever since." He stepped into the room, closed the door. "Heard you got troubles with railroad. It's not your fight. White man risks his life for colored soldier in middle of battle. That man's fights are my fights." He smiled. "Plus, I got 6 others from the colored regiment who remember you too. We've been waiting for chance to pay back. I don't need, not about need, about debt, about right. Railroad been pushing colored folks off land too. About time someone pushed back." Sana looked between them. "You trust him with my life. Already did once. Then we are 9 against army." She smiled. "Better odds." They left that night, 3 unlikely allies riding hard for home. Behind them, Denver slept unaware that war was coming to the mountains. Not war between nations or races, but between those who took and those who stood their ground. The land office could have its papers, the railroad could have its lawyers, but Colt and Sana had something more: people willing to fight for them, and the determination of those with nothing left to lose. The moon rose full and bright, lighting their way home. Whatever tomorrow brought, they'd face it together. They rode through the night like ghosts, Elijah setting a punishing pace that had them back in the valley by dawn. His 6 men were already there, hidden in the rocks above Colt's cabin, armed and ready. The cabin itself stood empty, door swinging in the morning breeze, but Colt could see the tracks, dozens of horses, wagon wheels, boots. The railroad had already come. "Least they didn't burn it," Elijah observed, scanning the scene through some field glasses. "They want it intact," Sana said, "to live in after they steal it." One of Elijah's men, a scarred veteran named Moses, climbed down from his perch. They made camp about half-mile east, maybe 30 men plus cavalry unit, got a judge with them too. "Judge," Colt frowned, "for making it all legal-like. Gonna hold court right here, declare you in violation, seize the land all proper." Sana spat in the dirt. "White man's justice. Only kind they recognize," Elijah said. "So we give them something else to think about." They spent the morning preparing. The colored veterans knew their business, setting up crossfire positions, checking sight lines, planning retreat routes. Sana moved among them like smoke, teaching them Apache hand signals, showing them how to move silent. "Your woman's something," Moses said to Colt as they dug in. "Not my woman, my partner." Moses grinned. "Sure, boss, whatever you say." Near noon, they heard them coming. The railroad men rode in like conquerors, Josiah Briggs at the front, despite his bandaged ear. Behind him, Crenshaw looking satisfied as a cat with cream. The cavalry unit followed young soldiers who looked like they'd rather be anywhere else. And finally, the judge, a thin man in black robes that seemed absurd in the wilderness setting. They set up court in Colt's yard, the judge sitting behind a table they'd brought, American flag planted in the ground beside him. It would have been comical if it wasn't so dangerous. Let it be known, the judge intoned, that this court is now in session regarding the matter of land dispute between Mr. Colt Hayward and the Mountain Pacific Railroad Company. That's when Colt stood up from his hiding spot, rifle visible but not raised. Hard to have a trial without the accused present. Soldiers scrambled for weapons, but their sergeant held up a hand. Colt recognized him. Thomas Brennan, good soldier, fair man. They'd served near each other in the war, different sides, but mutual respect. "Hayward," Brennan called out, "come peaceful, no need for bloodshed. Tell that to them, they drew first blood weeks ago." "That's a lie," Josiah snarled. "Is it, show the judge your ear, Josiah. Tell him how you got that wound." The judge looked confused. "What's this about?" "Nothing relevant," Crenshaw interrupted. "Hayward's a squatter and a kidnapper. That's all that matters." "I have proof of ownership," Colt called out. "Filed 7 years ago, legal and proper." "Produce it then," the judge said. Colt climbed down slowly, hands visible newspaper notice in his pocket. But as he approached, Crenshaw drew his pistol. "That's close enough." "Man has right to present evidence," Sergeant Brennan said quietly. "Man forfeits rights when he harbors fugitives," Crenshaw replied. That's when Sana stood up, and suddenly everyone could see they were surrounded. 7 colored veterans and 1 Apache woman, all armed, all with clear shots. "Ambush!" one of the soldiers yelled. "No!" Elijah called out, standing tall. "Justice!" The judge had gone pale. "Sergeant Washington, is that you?" "It is Judge Patterson. Surprised you remember. You saved my son at Petersburg." "I did, and now I'm asking you to remember what justice means." Patterson swallowed hard. "Lower your weapons, all of you." "Judge," Crenshaw started. "I said lower them." Reluctantly, guns went down. Colt approached, handed over the newspaper notice. Patterson examined it, frowning. "This appears legitimate. Predates railroad claim by years." "It's forged," Crenshaw said desperately. "By the newspaper 7 years ago. For what purpose?" "Judge," Colt said, "there's more. Crenshaw's been stealing from the Apache reservation, selling their supplies, letting them starve. I have witnesses." "Lies." "Then let's ask her." Colt pointed to Sana. "She lived it. She's Apache, can't testify in white court." "This isn't a white court," Patterson said slowly. "This is territorial court. Different rules." Sana climbed down, every eye on her. She walked with that particular grace she had, dangerous and beautiful at once. When she stood before the judge, she didn't bow or cower. "Your name?" Patterson asked. "Sana, granddaughter of Toka, elder of the Mescalero." "Do you swear to speak truth?" "Apache don't lie in matters of justice. Only whites need oaths." Someone laughed nervously. Patterson almost smiled. "Tell me about Crenshaw." She spoke for 10 minutes, her English clear and damning. The missing supplies, the children dying of hunger, the women forced to earn extra rations. By the end, even some of the soldiers looked sick. "Lies," Crenshaw said, but his voice shook. "All lies." "Then you won't mind if we check the reservation records," Patterson said. "Compare what was sent versus what was distributed." Crenshaw went for his gun again, but this time Moses was faster. The shot took Crenshaw's pistol from his hand, sent it spinning into the dirt. "None of that," Moses said mildly. That's when everything went wrong. One of the younger soldiers, nervous and trigger-happy, fired at Moses. Moses dove the bullet, catching his shoulder instead of his chest. Then everyone was shooting. Colt grabbed Sana, pulled her behind the water trough as bullets filled the air. Elijah and his men had the high ground, kept the soldiers pinned, but they were outnumbered. "Stop!" Sergeant Brennan roared. "Cease fire!" Gradually the shooting stopped. 2 soldiers were down, wounded but alive. Moses was bleeding but still fighting, and Josiah Briggs lay still in the dirt, a bullet through his chest, though nobody was sure whose bullet. "Enough," Judge Patterson said, standing despite the danger. This has gone too far. Judge Crenshaw started cradling his injured hand. Shut up. You're under arrest for corruption, theft, and inciting violence. You can't. I can, and I am. He turned to the railroad lawyer who'd been cowering behind a wagon. As for the land dispute, Mr. Hayward's claim clearly predates yours. The land is his. The railroad won't accept this. The railroad will accept it or face federal investigation for fraud. Patterson was finding his backbone. I've overlooked a lot, but attempted murder of federal soldiers that brings attention nobody wants. The lawyer knew when he was beaten. We'll need formal documentation. You'll have it. Patterson turned to Colt. Mr. Hayward, the land is yours, free and clear. And Sana, what about her? She's supposedly a fugitive from the reservation. Patterson looked at Sana, something shifting in his expression. I see no fugitive. I see a woman on her own property, as is her right as your wife. The question hung in the air. Colt felt Sana tense beside him. Partner, Colt said. Equal partner in the land. That's irregular. Whole damn territory's irregular, Judge. Patterson actually smiled. True enough. Let the record show Sana is legal resident and co-owner of this property. Anyone who disagrees can take it up with federal court. Crenshaw tried to run then, but didn't get far. Kuruk and 3 Apache warriors emerged from the forest, having been watching the whole time. They didn't touch him, just stood in his path, and he collapsed, sobbing. Pathetic, Kuruk said, in perfect English, surprising everyone. He looked at the judge. This man has crimes to answer for among my people, too. He'll stand trial, Patterson promised. White man's trial, white man's justice. Slap on wrist, maybe. Not this time, you have my word. Kuruk studied him. We will watch. If your word proves false. He didn't need to finish the threat. As the soldiers prepared to leave, taking Crenshaw and Josiah's body with them, Sergeant Brennan approached Colt. Hell of a thing, he said. Sorry it came to this. You did right, Tom, keeping your men from massacring us. Wasn't easy. Some of these boys, all they know about Indians is what they've been told. Maybe they learned something different today. Maybe. Brennan looked at Sana, who was tending Moses's wound with surprising gentleness. She's not what I expected. People rarely are when you actually see them. After they left, Elijah and his men stayed to help clean up. Moses would recover, though he'd have another scar to add to his collection. As the sun set, they sat around a fire in Colt's yard, sharing whiskey and stories. So what now? Elijah asked. You got your land, got your woman, partner. Colt and Sana said simultaneously, making everyone laugh. Right, partner, what's next? Colt looked at Sana. Don't know, never thought we'd get this far. Build, she said simply. Make this place what it should be. Together. Where else would I go? That question again, but this time it felt different. Not desperate, but chosen. That night, after Elijah and his men had bedded down in the barn, Colt and Sana stood on the porch looking at their land, really theirs now, legal and clear. Thank you, she said quietly. For what? For not trading me, for standing up, for seeing me as person, not property. Thank you for staying, for fighting beside me, for teaching me there's different ways to be strong. She turned to him, moonlight catching the planes of her face. Colt, yeah, I don't want to sleep in the lean-to anymore. His heart stopped. Sana, not like that, not yet, but cold nights coming, waste of wood heating 2 spaces. Practical, very practical. But she was almost smiling. They moved her few things into the cabin that night. She took the small bed they'd made near the stove. He kept his regular spot, but the distance between them felt like possibility rather than separation. Over the following weeks, they worked to improve the place. Elijah and his men helped for a while, raising a new barn, fixing the fences properly. When they left, Elijah pulled Colt aside. You know what you got there, right? A good partner, a woman who'd die for you, and you'd die for her. That's partnership. No friend, that's love. You just too stubborn to see it yet. After they left, the cabin felt quiet, but not empty. Sana had made it home, her herbs hanging from the rafters, her bow in the corner, her presence in every small touch. They worked side by side, barely needing words anymore. One evening, first snow beginning to fall, she stood from supper and walked to his side of the table. "I've been thinking," she said, "dangerous habit, about what Judge said about being wife." Colt's mouth went dry. "Sana, you don't have to." "I know, that's why I want to." She knelt beside his chair, took his hands. "Not because grandfather sent me, not because I have nowhere else, because I choose you. Do you choose me? Every day, every damn day, I choose you. Then make it real, Apache way and white way both." "You sure?" "I've never been sure of anything except survival. Now I'm sure of this too." They were married twice, once by Kuruk in the Apache tradition, once by Mrs. Chen, who turned out to be an ordained minister from her missionary days. The ceremony was small, just them and a few witnesses, but it felt like the whole world shifting into place. Winter came hard that year, but the cabin stayed warm. They learned each other in new ways, how she hummed when content, how he always woke before dawn, how they both reached for weapons at unexpected sounds, then laughed at their own paranoia. When spring arrived, Sana was sick in the mornings. Colt panicked, thinking it was fever, but she just smiled. "Not sick," she said. "Growing. Growing." She took his hand, placed it on her still flat stomach. "Growing someone new, part you, part me, all ours." The joy and terror that filled him was like nothing he'd ever felt. A baby, future, hope. She smiled. Home needs children to be complete. 7 months later, as autumn painted the mountains gold, their son was born. They named him Thomas, after Colt's brother, but called him Tom, a new version of an old name, a bridge between past and future. "He has your eyes," Sana said, exhausted but radiant. "Your strength," Colt replied, touching the baby's impossibly small fingers. "Our choice," she said, "our hope." They raised him between two worlds, teaching him to track and shoot, to read and write, to respect all people, regardless of skin color. He grew strong and kind friends, with both Apache and white children, living proof that different peoples could create something beautiful together. Years later, when Colt's hair had gone gray and Sana's face showed the lines of laughter and sun, they sat on their expanded porch watching their son, now grown, teach his own children to walk silent through the forest. "Was it worth it?" Sana asked. "All the fighting, all the pain." "Every second," Colt said, taking her hand. I got to choose," she said simply. "First time in my life, I got to choose. And I chose this, chose you, chose us." "Where else would you have gone?" he asked, echoing her old question. "Nowhere," she said. "This was always where I was meant to be. Just took us both a while to find it." The sun set behind the mountains, painting everything gold and possible. Their grandchildren's laughter echoed across the valley. The cabin had become a house, the house had become a home, and two broken people had become whole by choosing to stand together. In the end, that's all any of us can do, find someone worth standing beside and refuse to let go no matter what storms come. Colt had saved an Apache elder from a bear and in return had received not a wife as payment, but something far more valuable, a partner, a love, a life worth living. The debt had been paid in full, but what grew from it was priceless. As night fell and they headed inside, Sana hummed that old song, the one about finding home in unexpected places. But now it didn't sound mournful. It sounded like gratitude, like completion, like love. They'd both been exiles, cast out and abandoned. But together they'd built something that could never be taken away, a family, a legacy, a love that bridged two worlds and created something entirely new. This was their land, their choice, their unexpected reward, and it was more than either had ever dared to dream when a brave rancher saved an elder and woke to find his future waiting at his door. The story ended, where all the best stories do not with ending at all, but with continuation. Children grew, seasons turned, love deepened. And somewhere in the mountains of Colorado, a cabin stood as testament to the power of choosing love over fear, partnership over ownership, and hope over resignation. They lived, they loved, they chose each other again and again. And that in the end was everything.